Hello, everybody. Welcome to Culture Codes, the podcast. I'm Felicitas Olszewski, unpacking cultural influence at the intersection of brand, product, and innovation every week. You can find us on culturecodes.substack.com. Today, we're talking about Gen Z, but not in the headlines and hype way most of the industry does. No, we're talking about the real Gen Z, the students navigating identity, ambition, burnout, community, and opportunity in a world that's changing faster than the institutions meant to support them. Our guest today is Julia Haber, the founder of Home from College, a platform built to bridge the gap between brands and the next generation of talent. From her early days launching experiential pop-ups on campuses across the US to now building a digital ecosystem where students can build skills portfolios and professional confidence, Julia has become one of the sharpest voices on understanding what Gen Z actually wants from work, from brands, and from themselves. In this conversation, we'll explore how campus culture is evolving, how Gen Z evaluates brand credibility, and why the next big opportunity for both talent and companies lives at the intersection of skills, community, and cultural fluency. We'll talk about what it really takes to build trust with young people, how to create experiences that matter, and what every brand can learn from the way Julia is designing Home from College. Welcome, Julia. Welcome to Culture Codes.
Thanks so much for having me. I was laughing the other day because I was going to pull a stat and see how many times I've said Gen Z in the last year from my chat GPT and my granola note taker, and I'm sure the stat is very scary. So I'm happy to be here and chat.
That's so funny. Well, we're so happy to have you. It's so interesting what you're doing. And we got introduced by, I would say, a mutual friend. When we had an initial conversation, I was really impressed by the work you're doing, the type of brands you're working with, and your journey as an entrepreneur. For our listeners who don't know you that well, maybe we'll start to talk a little bit about yourself, how Home from College started. Yeah, the idea from the start to where you're at now.
Cool. Thanks so much. I have been building my career in the college space. I feel like I earned my credibility because I've been to over 100 college campuses in my life. So spent a lot of time with the demographic and understanding the phase of life and what's going on, and simultaneously companies who want to reach that audience. My first company was called Wave. It was an experiential marketing agency, like you mentioned, where we built 40-foot trailer pop-ups on college campuses all over the US and really bridge that gap where we were helping brands essentially show up, build a relationship, teach about themselves, and give value to students. And it was a really fulfilling experience, and traveled all over the US and spoke to thousands of students. And really what emerged from that was that students would come to our pop-ups with Shopify and Rent the Runway and T-Mobile and other brands. And they'd say, great, I get that this brand wants me to start my own business or change my phone plan, but can I work at this company? Because I have no idea what I want to do with my life, and I'm broke, and my major doesn't at all align to my career. And I had this light bulb moment that there was this opportunity to more organically and value add combine the needs of both companies and students through a two-sided platform that ultimately helps students earn their first dollars, figure out who they were, work with brands that they love, and simultaneously give companies access to this audience that they're trying to acquire, trying to build as brand loyalists through a tech platform. And that was the genesis of Home from College. And we have scaled and grown tremendously. We have students across every campus in the US. We work with thousands of brands, and has been really meaningful to bring it all to life.
That's so exciting. And you must have a ton of learnings and probably acquired a lot of knowledge before starting the platform. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like before the platform existed, you spent years embedded being really into student culture. And what was it that made you realize brands were missing the mark and how to reach and empower young people and speak to them maybe also in their voice?
I think there is a couple of different layers to this. So there's the subculture moment that I know you tap into all the time in your current job. It's what's going on in social media, what's happening in the trends, what is going on in these cultural ecosystems that exist on campus. And that's the new artists and the new fashion trends. And that is happening every day, every minute within this kind of college, Gen Z,
Yeah.
early career ecosystem. Beneath that is the phase of life that it represents, which creates a ton of uncertainty. For most people, this is the first time they've ever been away from
Yeah.
their families. They are most likely financially independent, most likely in a ton of debt, most likely trying to figure out who they are. And the blend together creates a really interesting desire for experimentation and meeting new people and pushing yourself in new boundaries and creating new habits. But it also creates a lot of anxiety. And I think the best brands and companies who want to reach this audience understand the kind of macro moments that this phase of life represents, and then the cultural micro moments, and marry them
Yeah.
together really well so that the story is being told not only for the minute and the time and the week, but also for the phase of life.
That makes total sense. And I guess all of that insight you packed into Home from College. What do you think makes your approach different? How are you rethinking experience, opportunity, and skill building compared to what Gen Z might find in more traditional companies and institutions?
One of the key stats that was the reason for starting Home from College is that only 12% of students ever go to career service centers before they graduate
Wow.
college. So we always talk about, oh, the career service centers on campus, and this is where you're going to get a job, and this is where the opportunities live. I think over the last 5 to 7 years, that has shifted really dramatically because the types of companies that are out there are changing. The reliability of leaning on the schools exclusively is not necessarily the best approach. Career service centers are typically the most underfunded within the school. So it's challenging to meet the demand of a large student base to help them in their career. So that was one core insight, that students were actually not getting the value of who am I and what am I going to do after
Yeah.
this expensive degree within the institution. And then the second is that we really thought that there was no brand that was telling this story of like, I'm at the ground floor. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. I'm not going to talk to my parents about it because they're old and I don't get it and they're going to tell me to go to class. And I don't really have that many people to look up to. And we said, what if we embody this kind of cool older sister as a brand
Yeah.
where students can feel like they can come to us? And it's okay to have nothing on your resume. It's okay to have no experience ever. And simultaneously, being this place where the more information you share, the more that you take time to invest in our platform, the more will help you. So students get scored on the platform based on how much they're sharing with us, interests, passions, hobbies, all of those things. We have a potential score that says you have potential, you're a rising star. And those are all things that companies get to see within the context of early career and even marketing to the demographic. And that's been really awesome to see the impact of helping those who would have really had no start otherwise.
That's amazing. I love that empowering sentiment and the vibe of an older sister. I feel like that's really, really nice. And I think that taps into my next question, because I remember from our conversation you said, well, Gen Z doesn't want to be marketed to; they want to be partnered with. What does partnership look like between students and brands in 2026?
One of the things that I feel really strongly about as we've built the trust in brand and Home from College is that the companies on Home from College need to be the ones that students love and trust. It can't be an unknown, sketchy app that you're afraid that you're not actually going to get paid. So on Home from College, we've really invested in prioritizing the brands that students actually want to work with. So we work with Uber and Etsy and Linktree and Kosas and Poppy and all of the like cultural iconic brands. And what that has done is signaled to some of the other companies who aspire to be like that, that this is a trusted place for them. And simultaneously, what it has done is allowed us to create opportunities that students are really excited about. And where we've really leaned into is marketing kind of low barrier to entry type of roles. So that could be anything from product testing, focus groups, ambassador programs, sampling, content at scale, micro influencers, student organization events. So things that are really low to no skill so that you can get your foot in the door without actually needing to have a ton of experience and then grow from there. And that has been really valuable to position the opportunity as accessible because so many companies are hiring for full-time roles that need entry-level positions with years of experience. And there's a whole discourse around AI and what that's going to happen, what impact that's going to be for early talent. So really thinking about from the lens of getting your foot in the door without a ton of requirements from a skill perspective has been the
Yeah.
most valuable part of our story.
And what do you think are some of the cultural codes that are defining Gen Z when it comes to, ambition, identity, what they expect from brands in the workplace? I feel like Gen Z has a bit of a reputation of going back to very strict 9 to 5s, doesn't want to long hours, doesn't want to put like that early hustle and grind into their early careers, like maybe some other generations. And I feel like sometimes that's being looked at as a bad thing. What's your perception of this? Interacting with students, and how do you feel about it?
I think the cohort is broken up in a couple groups. One are definitely, we kind of call them internally the natty light bros. So the people in college who are just there for a good time, not a long time, not thinking about the future, just very present in whatever's happening in their life right now. And those people, I would say, are have the stereotype of not being incredibly career ambitious, but I would call them a little bit out of sight, out of mind. And that group definitely exists. Then there's the group you're talking about, which is boundary setting. I'm not interested in going quote unquote above and beyond what you're asking me. I'm being paid for this, or I'm not going to do it if I'm not paid. And that group is the one that gets the biggest reputation externally.
Uh,
The third group that I would say that's really interesting are those who are, I'm a strict 9 to 5er, or I am a portfolio career person where I have no desire to actually work for one person, but my 9 to 5 is just one small part of the story of who I am. And I need to reserve the other time because I love to walk, or I am going to be a micro creator on the side, or I opened a drop shipping website, and they don't want to give more than that is specifically defined because that energy could be spent elsewhere. And what that can create is a level of discontent with the person on the other side because there is a misunderstanding around the expectation. And I think that it is very much true that there is not necessarily a desire to go above and beyond, which is a pro and a con at times. But I think it's also pushing us to understand a mindset that's totally different than millennials and some boomers as well.
yeah, and I think in particular because they have experienced the pandemic, much different, and a lot has shifted in the workplace ever since. And so it's also, I think, a sign of the time of how we move with that.
Definitely. Something that's, I think, important to note as well, and I've mentioned this in the past, Gen Z has grown up. They were like very young babies or just alive when 9/11 happened. There's been a lot, the recession when they were young kids. So maybe their parents were impacted by that. Then COVID happened. Then they were sent home from school, and then the job market and AI, and there's nothing stable. So the reliability of you, an employer, or whatever that looks like, doesn't necessarily feel trusting to them. So the concept of owning and facilitating their own career and success is something ingrained because the environment has not been stable for them.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And so I think it's also an interesting thing to see how to form interesting experiences and engagements with young people these days. Speaking of some of these collaborations and projects, you obviously have done a lot of them and you see many of them happening day in, day out. Is there anything? So, A, what are some of the ones that you love the most and why? And what were interesting observations to see from the students and your audience in terms of reacting and engaging to it, and why?
So every opportunity on Home from College is paid. And we made that as a really important through line for our whole experience. It's a little bit more mainstream now, but when we started this business, it was a little bit of a topic. And today, through that, we've created a lot of interesting incentive structures because I think compensation is a baseline, but feeling valued in what you're contributing to the outcome of a business's needs is almost more exciting. So, an exciting one and a fun partnership that we've done is with Uber, and Uber's goals and ambitions are to win the college market, and they do a ton across clubs and organizations and hyper niche moments and really leaning in through data to understand what's happening in these markets. So we supported their back to school campaign, which was a Uber One arcade. And
Mhm.
that concept was ideated by a Gen Z advisory panel through Home from College. So they came up with the concept. And then there was brand partnerships that were part of that activation that were with Dunkin' Donuts and Taco Bell, and those ideas were generated by the students. And then we had brand ambassador students actually working the activation who were gamified and incentivized to bring groups of students to come. So it was almost like a mini sales role where they had to drive conversion of new users and signups through a gamified approach. And we had a leaderboard. So there was a lot of learning that happened in that way that contributed business ROI and strategy. But for them, it was I'm competing against my friends and I can win an Uber dinner for my sorority. I can get first access to these experiences. So I think tapping into the basic need of I'm being paid and this is worth my time. I'm being valued because my ideas are being taken seriously and brought to life. And I can see the impact I'm making because a goal was set for me and I was able to achieve it. And like foundationally, for every experience, those are the best ones because companies get ROI and students feel valued. And that's been a through line across a lot of programs that have worked really well.
I love that. And there's so much talk these days about engaging cohorts and super fans and, really tapping into the fandoms. And some of the brands you've mentioned, I know have really strong fan base, particularly amongst younger audiences. And so engaging them at this level feels really fresh and modern in a non-stiff context, but something that I think is really important and probably has a lot of reward for both sides, including the brands, to feeling to do something meaningful.
And it's a long-term impact too. It's a relationship. It's not just a transactional moment in time. This brand was here for me in that way. And I'm even more invested because I contributed to something that I saw come to
Yeah.
life. And that is long-term fandom. It's not a transactional moment or a social media impression. It's actual value for the long term, which is what a lot of companies are looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And now you're bringing all of this, not only, of course, IRL to campuses, but there's a tech enabled digital platform behind it. And building something like this in today's world where technology is changing through the rapid pace of AI is, of course, increasingly complex. What are some of your biggest learning curves from product development, community engagement, community building, but also to hiring a team, building a company that you want to share?
It's really fun to talk about this as a non-technical person because everything and pre kind of the AI era is when we really started this product. And a lot of the choices we made were human-centric design. So that was really important to me because I, as a non-technical person, would know my own experience and others' experience of what a really beautiful product feels like and what's actually valuable. And for us, there was things that we built into the product design from the very beginning that were really important as core tenets. One example is really making every opportunity for students feel low barrier to entry, that you weren't not good enough for it, that you had enough experience, that there wasn't a high barrier, that you didn't need to have a ton on your resume. And those were things that we really thought through in the whole user experience. So what does onboarding look like? How quick does it allow you to do this? What value do you see on the other end? How quickly are you going to get an opportunity? And those things as a non-technical person really allowed us to really think through the human piece really well. And we get feedback all the time that our product is really beautiful and easy to use on both consumer and company side. But we did, hundreds of focus groups with thousands of students. And in the very early days, same on the company side. And we actually have a new product rolling out in this quarter. And I've spent more than 60% of my time on one-on-one user interviews and understanding
That's
what that
amazing.
experience looks like. And it's so fascinating because most people forget to actually ask their consumer, does this make sense? Do you like this? Is this valuable? And especially within a product that's as technically complex as ours with a ton of tools and features and functionality and a ton of volume that's happening through our Rails, we can pull reports and dashboards to see behavior, but the human piece is also important to digest as you think about what to build and where the friction lies.
Absolutely. I think that's such an interesting point that you're saying, I'm going to make this really simple. I want everybody feel like they can do it, regardless of skill set, and having that come back in a really seamless, simple experience as well, so that you remove any type of friction. I think that makes so much sense. And it just adds up to this empowering sentiment, no, that you're sort of like having overall with home from college.
Totally. And on the company side as well, where We've made it really easy for all different types of brands. We work with very large Fortune 500 companies and one-person startups who use our platform. The experience is not complex as it relates to deep onboarding and integrations, no matter if you're, Uber, C, or, a large tech company we work with or a small mom and pop. It's as intuitive, and that was really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. And can you talk a little bit about building your team, how that's been growing a company? What were some of the challenges? What were you looking for in people when you were hiring them? And how would you describe the culture at home from college?
Yeah. So, really early, we brought on our first two engineers who were instrumental in understanding building an initial use case and product. And I know we've talked about this. We are a marketplace. So there's two sides and there's two products and there's two product market fits and there's two user experiences and everything is more complex within that. So having people who had experience doing that was really important. We are, for all intents and purposes, a career platform, but we're not an HR tech tool. We're more of a marketing tool. So thinking through that B2B experience and knowing we had the right people who had B2B sales experience, also understood the agency world, understood all of these different pieces. So as time evolved, we carved out what are the sub areas within our business, not just product marketing, engineering, sales, but the sub niches of agency relations and platform sales and customer success. But something I've made a really important tenet across our whole organization is truly treating every person and every interaction with the most respect and kindness. And you will understand this, but I was always and am very cautious of the way that every experience feels, specifically on the student side, because you can get canceled very quickly on the internet. And it's a sensitive topic, and we wanted to have a stance in how we made people feel when they came to our platform. Every quarter, we do trainings about topics and questions that emerge and problems that could have been solved in different ways and human error from an emotional intelligence perspective that came up. And so that has been a through line in our culture. We have a young, very vibrant in-office community, and we tripled our team in the last year. So those have been some
Amazing.
serious growing pains as we've been, building out the leadership team and scaling on all different sides of the product as well.
That's amazing. And I also got to meet your husband when we met in person, and he's obviously a big part of the company as well. What has that experience been like building something together in a relationship, and how do you manage the overlap between some of the areas in your personal relationship and building a company together?
We met in the context of work, and my previous startup I ran as a solo founder, which I vowed I would never do again because it is so challenging and I am really good at a couple of things and absolutely horrible at others. Like, do not ask me to run payroll or the financial model or deal with contracts or anything like that. And Kai, my husband, is actually the complete opposite brain of mine, and he is super operational. He has a private equity banking background, pretty much everything I'm not. So immediately we were really great business partners. But the piece I think that has made our company so strong and culture really valuable is that we have the same value system. So if we're debating if we do something or how we treat a situation or how we prioritize issues, or we have a no drama culture, like there's none of that energy. If you
No
smell
drama culture.
like you're literally out the door before the interview is over. And that's been really beautiful together. But I'm not going to lie, we have intense dinner table discussions, and I'll tap his shoulder at 11 o'clock at night and say, I think we need a button there. The lines are not super clear, but it's a beautiful thing and also sometimes tiring.
I can imagine. Yeah, it's a bit of both as you're building. But thanks for sharing that. I think that's so true about building a team. And, I speak to a lot of founders, obviously, and I think that finding that complementary piece of the puzzle and understanding what your strengths are and what to delegate and how to build the perfect team is so important to success and scaling, which I can relate to, that this has been probably one of your sort of like top things as you're looking for talent and how to build this thing. So thank you for sharing that. When going back to the brand side a little bit, you spoke a little bit about marketplace. What do you think does it actually take to win credibility with Gen Z these days? And how do you build that trust? What is it that maybe either in the digital experience that you've built or in some of these first engagements that you have maybe with new campuses as you were building your footprint that you thought were really important, and maybe learnings on how to build that trust?
Through the brands that use our platform, we've learned so much of what works and doesn't work. We're almost like a little microcosm of data. We see what successfully or not successfully runs throughout every program ever through our rails. So there's been hundreds of thousands of gigs in the years that we've been alive, and we can pull charts and data to see what has worked and what hasn't worked. I think one of the main things is expectation setting up top for both the student and the brand. There is this sense and feeling that everybody wants to be like Duolingo, and that is the biggest cop out answer across every situation ever. There's so many companies that come in at their enterprise level and reference Duolingo or
Mhm.
a big campaign that is absolutely not accessible, but they don't even pare down and understand how that could relate to their own business and what their goals are. So I think being able to translate specifically a business objective, whether it's brand awareness and love or conversion or what those positions look like in the ecosystem, and then translating it to what is a student actually capable of doing and will that drive that business impact is one of the things that we've really focused on from a translator perspective. So what we've seen fail is companies wanting an outcome that is culturally relevant from a case reference from 6 months ago because it was covered in Ad Age or Ad Week, and they want to replicate that strategy, but the world has since moved on. Like, I'm
Yeah,
sure you see this all the time.
definitely. Yeah.
And then a second I would say is the thought that every college student is the same, but there are so many subcultures, and there's, I think, 3,500 college campuses in the US. The South is very different than a commuter school in Chicago, is very different than a big state school in upstate New York, and the types of people there need to be talked to very differently. So, college strategically as a whole is not a good enough answer to really think through how to show up in ways that resonate with different sub communities within the audience.
That makes so much sense. And yes, absolutely. I think planning something like this, but then staying agile enough in terms of how to execute it, given the fact that culture and trends and conversations, or what you mentioned earlier, how people or things get canceled these days very quickly online is so important in order to do something that has impact in the moment and then feels also really relevant and creates that resonance with Gen Z students. I can imagine that that's utterly key in terms of how you probably work with your clients in terms of getting things to the launch, but also the finish line.
Yeah, definitely. And the other piece I'd add is just the at scale. So the concept of having one macro influencer be the figurehead of the campaign and then not doing something on a local cultural component is a
Mhm.
total miss. The best companies who use our platform are working with hundreds, if not thousands, of students at a time. And that army is super substantial. And that's one of the reasons we built a tech product. So it's actually easy to mobilize a community that large because you can see the waves throughout like the actual cultural zeitgeist at scale like that rather than some niche communities because you just have one figurehead creator or ambassador.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking ahead, you've come so far and you just said, your team has really grown over the last year. As we're at the beginning of a new year, and you probably have set your goals and look ahead to the future. Where do you see Home from College going, both as a cultural and a product, really shaping how an entire generation enters the workforce? What are some of the things on your wish list?
One of the new products that we're rolling out, we've been working on for the last, I'd say 4 months, and it came from a couple of insights in the way that companies want to utilize our platform. And the concept at a high level is almost like yelling in a crowded room, that sometimes brands want people to yell in a crowded room and take an action from it and not just yell in a crowded room, see it, and then walk by, which is typically what impressions are. And this new product allows brands to basically tap a massive group, have them create an action, and have it be completely seamless without them having to really do much work. And that is one of the things I'm so excited about because for us, we win when more students get placed in opportunities and more companies can see ROI. And this together really allows that because it lowers the barrier for students even more. And that is a core tenet for our thesis is, how many students are getting placed in gigs, how many companies are relisting gigs and sharing around that value, retaining, and then scaling from there. So that's a really exciting moment for us this year.
That's amazing. Anything, as a last note to our listeners, anything you would want to leave a young founder, entrepreneur, or someone who wants to just start, get building, get their idea into action? Some of the key learnings that you have and recommendations that you would give in terms of advice?
It is hard. And I think in this day and age when everyone is a content creator showcasing their founder story
Mm.
and showcasing all of the parts of their business, and just to be super clear, even when they're documenting their journey, they may not be showing all of the good and the bad. So you're not getting a full picture. And the emotional journey that it requires to be a founder, to wake up every day and have the worst thing happen and then have to look at your team and go, it's amazing. Or sell an investor who really is not excited about your business because you don't have money in the bank. Like, there are all scenarios that are so complex and abnormal to the world. And the feeling I would say is whatever you feel, you are validated, because it's a crazy experience. And I think, because it's now easier to do, it doesn't make it not challenging.
Yeah, I get that. Are you pro building in public or building in secrecy, or a bit of a hybrid?
I love the building in public to an extent. I think for the purpose of showing and building a community and utilizing that
Mhm.
community to drive impact, I think there are some things that you shouldn't necessarily share in public that are trade secrets that you have planned for the future. I spoke to this founder and she said, I always get a dupe. Somebody dupes my product. Absolutely. And we would see it within the year the product is duped. So she said, we knew once went out, we had 1 year to innovate the next version to come out before the dupe started. So for her, if she was building in public, the competition would have already met her where she was instead of being the innovative brand. So I think there's a balance and a strategic line to walk so that you don't actually give away your juice, but give enough juice to help you build your community and scale your product.
And win that credibility.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Julia. This was so insightful, and I love to learn more about home from college, and I'm sure so are our readers and listeners. Thank you, everyone, for listening and tuning in. If you liked this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. You find us, of course, on Substack, but also on Spotify and YouTube. And thank you, Julia. I'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.